He wanted £75, which is a lot of money. It was only about 10 quid cheaper than the one that was for sale in the shop, brand new, but he wouldn't.
In the realm of rock's greatest innovators, few names carry the mystique, genius, polarizing edge of Jeff Beck, a man who redefined the electric guitar but refused to bow to the mainstream's expectations. Known not just for his jaw-dropping technique, but also for his absolute intolerance toward musical laziness. Beck's journey wasn't just about mastering an instrument. It was a crusade against what he saw as the slow death of artistic standards, a sonic visionary who believed music was a sacred craft. Beck's relentless pursuit of perfection often turned admiration into animosity, sparking volatile tensions with some of the biggest legends in music history. This was no ordinary list of professional disagreements. This was a battlefield of ideologies where Beck's demand for innovation collided head-on with the commercial comforts of some of rock's most beloved names. But his path, while studded with Grammys and accolades, was marked just as deeply by rivalries, fallouts, and the burning bridge trails of 6 infamous musical relationships. As we unfold the complex saga of Beck versus his peers, what emerges isn't just the story of a man driven by tone and technique, but a cautionary tale of what happens when greatness refuses to compromise. And while fans debate whether he was a misunderstood genius or simply too difficult to work with, one truth stands unshaken: Jeff Beck never played for applause. He played for the future of music itself. Asterisk, when Guns N' Roses exploded onto MTV with their gritty riffs and streetwise swagger, Slash became the poster child for blues-infused hard rock. But for Jeff Beck, it was the beginning of a deep musical repulsion that couldn't be silenced. To Beck, Slash wasn't a prodigy, he was a prodigal waste of talent, drowning genuine ability in what Beck reportedly called 3-chord tantrums dressed up in leather and eyeliner. This wasn't merely a critique of style, it was a philosophical rejection of spectacle masquerading as substance. Behind closed doors, Beck scorned the band's success as evidence that audiences had grown deaf to sophistication, preferring loud rebellion to disciplined artistry. What cut deepest was that Slash, despite his limited technical range in Beck's view, was being celebrated globally while Beck was busy dissecting fusion jazz structures and pushing the electric guitar into uncharted experimental territory, remained more respected than adored. The tension simmered publicly through interviews and Guitar Magazine features, where the two were constantly compared in top guitarist lists, and reportedly boiled over during a studio encounter where Beck bluntly warned Slash that talent without curiosity leads to stagnation and circus tricks. For Beck, it wasn't just about Slash's volume or image, it was about a generation he believed was being misled by flash, not feeling. In a world where rebellion sold faster than refinement, Beck stood firm, convinced that technical mediocrity hidden behind distortion pedals was killing the future of real guitar music. And though Slash may have commanded the stadiums, it was Beck who, even in silence, struck the chord of artistic conviction louder than any amp could. Asterisk to the public. Eddie Van Halen was a revolutionary who changed the way people approached the guitar with his iconic tapping techniques and energetic showmanship, but to Jeff Beck, it was an illusion built on flash and gimmickry rather than emotional depth or true innovation. Behind Beck's critique wasn't jealousy. It was disappointment that such raw talent could be funneled into what he considered acrobatics without artistry. He reportedly told close studio colleagues that Eddie's playing felt more like finger exercises disguised as compositions, impressive to other guitarists perhaps, but lacking the soul and vulnerability that Beck demanded of real music. This quiet contempt became most evident in the late 1970s, when Van Halen's fame surged. And Beck's subtle, synth-infused fusion explorations went unnoticed by a public, increasingly enamored with faster solos and louder riffs. Their philosophical divide wasn't about skill, it was about purpose. Beck saw the guitar as a voice, a storyteller capable of sadness, rage, and beauty. Van Halen's style and his eyes turned that voice into a party trick, a dazzling distraction that got applause, but not introspection. At one point, Beck was quoted in an interview saying, "Innovation means expanding what music can express, not just finding new ways to play fast," a clear jab at Eddie's technique-first approach. This wasn't mere rivalry, it was a bitter schism between substance and show, between a craftsman haunted by depth and a performer celebrated for dazzle. And while Eddie was crowned a legend for his explosive presence, Beck remained the lone purist in a shifting musical era, resisting the urge to adapt to a world that, to him, had lost its emotional compass in the race to be louder, faster, and more extreme. In the high-octane world of neoclassical metal, Yngwie Malmsteen carved a name for himself as the Paganini of the electric guitar, merging Baroque melodies with metal speed. But to Jeff Beck, this entire genre movement represented a tragic betrayal of classical music's soul. Beck viewed Malmsteen's arpeggios and harmonic minor runs not as homage, but as exploitation, a reckless appropriation of centuries-old genius used for nothing more than headbanger theatrics. He was deeply vocal in private circles, reportedly mocking Malmsteen as a conservatory dropout, turning Batch into background noise for mosh pits, and publicly criticized the entire shredder movement as guitar masturbation sessions that valued speed over substance. For Beck, classical music was sacred. It demanded emotional understanding, not just mimicry at lightning speed. The real offense wasn't that Malmsteen played fast, but that he played without soul, turning Vivaldi's emotional architecture into a muscle-flexing contest. Their rivalry peaked in the mid-'80s, when both were featured in virtuoso debates and festival circuits. At one European music event, Beck allegedly derided Malmsteen's performance as karaoke for composers who deserve more than to be turned into practice routines. The bitterness wasn't just about genre, it was personal, a reflection of Beck's dismay that music education had been reduced to pattern memorization and ego. And while Malmsteen's fans celebrated his technique as divine, Beck remained unmoved. His barbs aimed not just at the player, but at an industry that rewarded technical gymnastics over human expression. In Beck's world, real classical influence required reverence, not just fingering the notes, but feeling their meaning into him. Malmsteen had violated that sacred trust with every rapid-fire solo he played, asterisk among Jeff Beck's many conflicts. His feud with Eric Clapton cut particularly deep, not only because of their shared history in the Yardbirds, but because it revealed a philosophical rift over the very soul of the blues. Where Clapton revered tradition and approached the genre like a curator preserving a sacred artifact, Beck believed the blues was meant to evolve, stretch, and absorb new sonic textures. Otherwise, it would become a museum piece. Beck privately criticized Clapton as someone afraid to disturb the blues exhibit, accusing him of turning a revolutionary genre into a frozen relic, worshipped but never reinvented. Despite their similar roots, Beck's journey took him into the realm of fusion, synth, and electronic experimentation. While Clapton stuck to the safe corridors of familiar progressions and vintage tones, the press fanned the flames with constant comparisons. But it was Beck's off-the-record remarks that stung the most, labeling Clapton's work as blues fundamentalism, a dogma that conflated repetition with authenticity. At a London session, Beck reportedly declared that the original blues masters weren't afraid to push boundaries. They were innovators in their time, not afraid of change. This wasn't just criticism. It was a referendum on what it means to honor a genre. Clapton may have been adored for his purity, but Beck viewed that adoration as the reward for playing it safe. In his eyes, Clapton was letting the blues die by freezing it in amber, and for a man like Beck, who believed music must grow or decay, that kind of stagnation was unforgivable. Asterisk among all of Jeff Beck's rivalries, none carried the weight of heartbreak and professional betrayal quite like his fractured relationship with Jimmy Page, the man who would go on to form Led Zeppelin and, in Beck's eyes, steal not only musical credit, but a piece of his legacy. What began as a brotherhood within the Yardbirds quickly unraveled into a bitter scorecard of stolen ideas, industry manipulation, and fame redistributed by narrative rather than merit. According to close insiders, Beck felt that Page didn't just replace him in the Yardbirds. He took the seeds of their shared experimentation, built an empire with it, and never looked back to acknowledge the man who helped plant them. While Page was crafting Led Zeppelin's colossal sound and earning historical reverence, Beck watched as the techniques they had pioneered together were repackaged and rebranded under Page's name. Privately, Beck referred to Page as a cunning businessman who profited from shared breakthroughs, suggesting that the real magic behind Zeppelin's musical alchemy was conceived in the rehearsal spaces and jam sessions they once shared. The resentment only deepened as Zeppelin climbed into global superstardom, while Beck battled lineup changes, shifting musical directions, and the suffocating sense that history had left his role behind. In interviews, Beck subtly expressed this anguish, saying things like, "The person who stays long enough gets the glory," a line widely interpreted as a jab at Page. This wasn't just about Fumet, it was about authorship. It's a right to own one's contributions in a world that remembers the frontman, not the architect. And as Led Zeppelin etched itself into the annals of rock mythology, Beck was left grappling with the bitter reality that being first doesn't always mean being remembered. While Page basked in the glow of a generation's devotion, Beck nursed a wound carved not by notes or melodies, but by omission, the kind that rewrites music history with the silence of acknowledgement never given. If Beck's fallout with Jimmy Page represented professional betrayal, his rupture with Rod Stewart was pure emotional devastation, the kind that redefines friendship as fragility and transforms trust into cautionary legend. Stewart, once the soulful vocalist fronting the Jeff Beck group, wasn't just a collaborator. He was the charismatic face of Beck's fusion of blues and rock, the voice that gave Beck's innovative guitar work mass appeal. But as fame beckoned, so did ambition, and Stewart made a decision that would fracture their creative bond forever. During the early 1970s, as Beck was meticulously shaping the band's unique sound, Stewart was simultaneously building his solo career, secretly plotting an exit that would blindside everyone involved. According to bassist Ronnie Wood, the Betrayal was abrupt. Trod vanished overnight without a proper goodbye, and Beck was left not only without a singer, but without the momentum the band had painstakingly built. Beck later confided in his bandmates that Stewart had used the group as a mere stepping stone, leveraging their rising credibility to vault into stardom. But it wasn't just the abandonment that crushed him, it was the cold efficiency of it. The sense that everything they had built together was disposable the moment a better opportunity appeared. And just as Beck's group stood on the edge of breakthrough success, their frontman walked away, leaving Beck holding the shattered pieces of a dream he thought was shared. To Beck, Stewart's rise wasn't a celebration, it was a confirmation. That loyalty was the first casualty in the war for fame. He once remarked that vocalists couldn't be trusted with group goals because they always heard the call of solo spotlight louder than the sound of camaraderie. As Stewart topped charts and captured hearts, Beck stared into the void left by a friend-turned-star. The sting of betrayal echoing louder than any guitar solo he would ever play. And in that echo, Beck learned that even the most electric collaborations can short-circuit when fame rewires the heart. Asterisk now that we've laid bare the 6 searing rivalries that marked Jeff Beck's career. One question remains. Was Beck's legendary pursuit of instrumental perfection, the uncompromising stance of a musical profiteur, the stubborn isolation of a man unwilling to bend? Each clash tells a different version of the same story: a guitar master who believed that music was not a product, not a show, not a brand, but a truth to be pursued with unflinching resolve. In a world where others embraced fame, image, and accessibility, Beck stood defiantly at the altar of authenticity, refusing to dilute his sound for the sake of wider appeal. To some, this made him difficult, even impossible to work with, a relentless perfectionist who saw artistic compromise as treason. But to others, especially those who measure music not by sales but by soul, Beck's stubbornness was the very thing that preserved his genius. He challenged icons, rejected comfort, and carried the burden of creative integrity like a torch through the fog of commercialism. And while others climbed the charts, Beck carved a different kind of monument, one built on respect, innovation, and the kind of fearlessness that few artists dare to embrace. His story isn't one of failure or bitterness, it's one of sacrifice. The kind required when you value the future of your art more than your place in the spotlight. Now, as fans revisit his catalog and rivals recall the friction, the truth remains. Jeff Beck didn't just play the guitar, He made it speak, scream, whisper, and weep. His sound was his signature, and his standards were his shield. In the end, Jeff Beck's legacy may not be built on the number of chart-topping hits or headline-grabbing collaborations, but on the raw, unapologetic pursuit of excellence that made every note he played matter. And that, perhaps, is the loudest statement any artist can make.